I was very lucky. I recognized as soon as I started, before I started teaching, I didn't know who I was and I wasn't happy. But I recognized very early on, teaching is something that intrinsically is part of who I am. And supporting other people and helping them grow and watching the aha moment of the development of other people is something that gives me enormous satisfaction and pleasure. And I had the real privilege of doing that in the context of school, both as a teacher and as a head teacher. And then latterly in working with individuals, couples, teams, and whole organizations. And I started genuinely just over 2 years ago to, to be able to impact on more people. And so my mission is I want to positively impact on 1 million people in the next 5 years. And to do that through enlightened leadership. So my challenge is no longer skiing down a mountain at breakneck speed or paragliding or skiing. My version of the challenge is to do what I'm doing and help more people on a very significant scale. And to do that using the skills and techniques and the strategies that I've developed over the years. So if I tell you that 2.5 years ago, I didn't have a Facebook page, I used the internet for research and emails. Since then, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, I've had to learn to create videos. I've created these online programs, very used to delivering them face to face, not a problem. But the complexity of the technology, for me, that's been like climbing Everest. And I'm not saying I'm at the summit, but I'm somewhere in the foothills. So I'm challenged by that. But when I look at what's been achieved with help, that gives me endless satisfaction. And I am determined that I am going to create a legacy where great enlightened leadership can make a difference. For me, enlightened leadership is not just about leading a big corporation, it's about leading your own life. So leadership for life means how you operate within the world, within your personal relationships, within your professional relationships, and what impact you're having. And so my view is every word that you utter, every action you take, or lack of words or actions leaves a living legacy. So many people use their words unkindly, and as they do that, they're leaving a negative legacy. So for me, it's all about taking radical responsibility for everything you do and being sure that what you do actually is making a positive impact.
I really agree with the whole philosophy of it's not just about having like a leadership business legacy. It's just sort of a legacy of having enjoyment on the earth and making other people happy kind of thing. And something I've really looked at in this podcast is not just people who are successful by the normal metrics of like being a billionaire. I mean, I've interviewed some billionaires, but also some people that are just really happy and maybe they got a bit of success, but then they're like, actually, all I need is a nice house and like to be able to like live in Costa Rica and have a fun time and play with my dogs. And it kind of stopped, but are living like a brilliant life in terms of happiness and joy, fulfillment every day. And you're like, what is the thing that we strive for? Because you've said like people kind of aim for this thing that we see on social media and other things like on Instagram. People want to be exactly like the people that they know, even though that might not be what makes them happy. And half those people aren't even that happy anyway. You only see the happy part of their lives where they're smiling and you don't see everything else behind it. It's really odd.
I mean, I think there's another pandemic, and that's comparisonitis. Comparisonitis means that, you're constantly comparing your physical body with photographs in the media that have been airbrushed and people who've had surgery and so on. But, for me, happiness is absolutely your choice. And one of the problems for people is that they've got the I'll be happy when syndrome. So I'll be happy when I've got the big house and the good job and the big car, and I've got a partner who's perfect and doesn't leave the top of the toothpaste or toilet seat up. And I've got kids who tidy their bedroom without being nagged, and the dog is perfectly behaved. And we create all of these criteria, and I've got to have this and this and this. And as soon as one is satisfied, we put another one on the end. The problem with that, of course, is that happiness is always in the future. It's never in the now. Now, if you choose a different way, which is I'll be happy every time the sun shines or every time it rains and I can appreciate the fact that it's watering the garden, every time I have a nice cup of tea or a hot shower, every time somebody smiles at me, every time the cat or the dog makes me smile, that the conditions for it, happiness are very easy to not only achieve, but to appreciate, then you can be happy a great part of the time. Now, does that mean that you're walking around with a big grin on your face? No, it doesn't. But what it does mean is that you're giving yourself the conditions of happiness and making an active choice. And when you do that, then the quality of your life changes. You don't have to wait to go to Costa Rica to have the lovely house. You can be happy where you are if you choose to be. It is absolutely your choice. And even on the deepest, darkest days, and make no mistake, I've had some of those, there are still things to be happy about. There's a technique that you can use, which is as you wake up in the morning, before I get up, hands on hips, waggle your elbows. I can't
Yeah.
feel my coffin. It's a new day, can't feel my coffin. Today I choose to be happy. But because it's so ridiculous, it makes you smile. And starting the day on a smile is not a bad thing, is it?
No, it's definitely the best way. Okay, cool. I'm going to try that. I need to like maybe put a sign next to my bed for when I first wake up to make sure that I remember. Yeah,
So some people call it the funky chicken, some people call it the penguin, other people I know called it the ostrich, call it what you like. But the whole process is about starting the day on a really positive note.
I do get a bit confused by, as in it's kind of all within your mind in terms of you kind of decide to be happy. But you know, when you're around some people and it just sort of happens so naturally, and then other people you have to really like try. Confusing one.
Well, it's interesting because you have people who I call energy havens. They're people who are very negative, who they are cut half empty. They will dwell on problems. And I would say to you, you either need to limit the amount of time you spend with those people, or you need to imagine yourself in a golden bubble and protect yourself so that anything you want to go out of the bubble can, but that their negativity is a bit like throwing eggs at a riot shield and just slips down rather than you internalizing it. They say that we are the sum of the five people we spend most of our time with. And I think that negativity is like a virus it's catching. The research shows that when something goes wrong, we tell on average 37 people. Now, added to that, it's a bit like Chinese whispers. As we tell each person, it gets embellished and it becomes more and more of the focus. It takes on a life of its own. But in contrast, the research shows that when things go right, people tell on average five. Now, how would the world be if it was the other way around? Now, I don't use my 37 up. I suspect you don't either. So if we're not using our 37, somebody is telling far more than 37. You know, negativity is catching. So for me, well, I survived and thrived because I focus on what I can do rather than focusing on what I can't. So when I came out of hospital after one of the two big surgeries I had, where I had failed back surgery syndrome, I was back at school 4 days later. Because if I stayed at home and somebody hadn't filled the kettle and left out a cup, I couldn't make a cup of tea. I had daytime TV and I could read. They were the two things I could do. I have to tell you, daytime television doesn't do it today.
Yeah.
But I could go to school. Somebody could help me into the taxi and help me out of the taxi. I could go to school and I could run my school from my office with help in terms of physicality. But my mouth worked, my brain worked, my hands worked. And I could do something that was useful and I loved. I mean, 5 months after I came out of hospital, the consultant said, you might think about you going back a couple of hours a week. And I just laughed because I had been part-time for 3 weeks and then full-time thereafter. And that was because for me, and I'm not saying that would work for everybody, the focusing on what I could do and doing something positive and useful was a huge part of who I am and of my recovery.
That's interesting. As in, I think some people sort of, they almost need to have like the break. Like you said, some people kind of get energy from being ill and kind of stuff. I kind of give that a bit. Yeah.
But one from having a very poor sense of worth. And, you know, people, when they're very tiny, most of our beliefs comes from when they're small. What I suspect has happened is parents were busy. And then when they said they were poorly, suddenly they got their parents' attention. So then they did it more and they got more attention. And so that's become a pattern of behavior. And 95% of our thinking and our behavior is habitual. So people who feel that the only way that they are noticed and valued by others. Now, please don't think there are lots of people who are ill because they're ill and that's not the case. But there are a percentage of people for whom being ill means that they get attention, they have a value that they don't have when they're not. in the
Yeah.
same way there are some people who believe that their only value is when they're doing something for somebody else,
Mm,
rather than recognizing that actually you're enough as you are. Each of us is a human being with our experience and our creativity and our uniqueness. And that is actually enough. We're not broken. For many people, that's something that they find difficult to recognize.